Hey Ron, it's Pistol PK. It's been a while. Thought it was time to have a bit of a chat. Just thought I'd give a little bit of an update on what I've been up to and some of the decisions, and also kind of give a little bit of opinion of what my view is on these new rules. So I've gone to don't take this as me being a spokesman for the admin team. I have a view. We all have a view, and we all agreed on every one of them. So ideally, when I put something into the chat, it's actually kind of my view. Obviously I try to weight it amongst what the admin all say together, but ideally we all come to an understanding, and you'll find that we all have reasons as to why we're interested in them. But anyway, I just thought I'd say it's been a while. Like I had a fairly big break. There was a reason for that. I was pretty frustrated. So frustrated in life, frustrated in work, and frustrated in the NSL. Um, Kind of gets pretty damn frustrating when you have a couple of teams. It seems we're very top heavy and we see a lot of like a number of teams tank and they go pretty hard, and it's there doesn't seem to be we got all of these teams in the middle, and I think you see that the people that go, or the teams that go the extreme actually have a fairly big impact on the league. And what's really been like relevant, sorry, what we've really seen even with those new rules is we see a lot of people looking at a closed bubble and their particular situation and their team, and you can kind of see with the snipes that we're seeing in the chat and the back-ended comments. So it almost feels like certain individuals think that the admin team are stupid or dumb or have a really low IQ. It's really stood out, especially with some of the stuff that's been said. So that gets really on my nerves. And obviously, some conversations get pretty passionate in the background. So, hence, I walked away. And in all honesty, I wasn't actually sure whether I was coming back because um, for those people that think it's an amazing league and it's their outlet and all the rest of it, to me, it felt like if I'm not getting the enjoyment out of it and I've got to do all this hard work in the back end to make sure that there's anything developed, and there is continual development on every product. So you can understand why the NLL went under, and obviously there was a lot of disharmony, not just because of one individual, but it hadn't evolved. And so there's always those kind of thoughts, and decisions that we make are definitely not done on a whim. We talk about them for months, years, actually. So a number of the conversations that we've had and the pushes that we put through today or over the last few weeks, they've actually been building up over the years, and kind of can see. And I'm going to talk a little bit about each one of them and kind of give my views and as to why I think it was a benefit. But from there, you can kind of obviously we'll give you all your own opinion, and that's what makes the league, I guess. To start off with, we kind of look at some of the injury changes that we've made. So as you're all aware, last season we made a very big injury change, and we brought in the count for 4 weeks or 4 games missed in the NBA means you miss a week. So ideally that was a pretty big kind of change, but what it didn't do, it didn't come. There was actually some outliers. So say for example, John Wall was an outlier. So don't put this as um, a rule just for one of our GMs. It was actually something we hadn't anticipated at the time that we brought all these changes in. So obviously it was just us trying to make it more enhanced. Ideally, we saw John Wall did miss the whole year, but actually every previous years we've had similar kind of scenarios and different. This year it really stood out. Like the last season, it really stood out. So we had to kind of think that through, and we didn't really want someone like John Wall coming back and have such a big impact on the playoffs. So yes, I can understand it's a massive benefit. People trade for him. Having a John Wall in your team and not being able to use him is very frustrating for the GM. So I definitely agree with that. I've got obviously a lot of long-term injuries, and I would love to see some of them come back. But ideally, it's about making the league as realistic as possible. And if John Wall isn't playing all season, he ain't playing in the playoffs. So we kind of just wanted to cement that in writing. And obviously, there'll be probably another player this year, or maybe two, that have very similar circumstances. So we didn't really want to have to kind of have a major hard decision to make, and then have to try and sell the thing to the league. Secondly, we looked at the playoff injuries. This is actually one that's been called out for many, many years. I think over the last 20 years, I think a number of people have brought this up of why it happens. There's a disparity between having a star on a crap team in the NBA and having a star that plays playoffs every year and has the potential to get injured. So ideally, we thought it was time to try and reduce our workload, especially during that playoff period, because it becomes actually really, really intense in regards to the amount of work that gets in the back end. And we've got the daily patches, we've got to make sure the injuries are updated, we've got to make sure all of the GMs are aware, organising all the insiders and the reviews, the previews. There's actually a number of tasks that just constantly make the playoffs a fairly big overhead. And as part of that, we decided that this rule not only does it make it a little bit more fair in the league, we decided to kind of make it a little bit more fair for the GMs and the teams and reduce our overhead a little bit. So ideally, I know Lattice was one with the biggest smile on his face when this one got proposed, and obviously we all unanimously agreed. I know that the other couple of the admins had brought this up in the other league and been smashed down like a hammer, so they were also very happy. So obviously we didn't really put that one through because obviously everyone was pretty damn happy. The next one was an interesting one because the in-game injuries this actually came along maybe a day or two after we had talked about the playoff injuries, and ideally it was like, well, if we're taking away these injuries and we're making it, say for example, where's the inconsistency or where's the unknowns, and why like it's going to be, some of these series become really boring. Like if you're the same team has the same settings and they're dominating the other team, how do we get it so that maybe a team surprises or something changes, or maybe you get that one off, or it might even have a big impact on one series because it might be that game-winning game. But hey, I think I enjoy that kind of the excitement of unknown. And a lot of the time I wasn't even looking at box scores anymore because it felt like you already knew the result. You didn't even have to look at the box scores. You go, yeah, this player's going to get this many points and they won because I already know what they're going to do. You're within 10, 20% of exactly what was going to happen. You could write on a bit of paper and predict it. So I was really, really, really keen to see this one in, and obviously the vote was pretty decent. 60-70% of the league was pretty on board, so I was pretty happy with that. But ideally, I think it allowed a bit of unknown and unpredictability, and we'll assess at the end of the year. But I'm excited to see what it does, and I won't be excited when one of my players gets out. But hey, you won't see me bagging it out. It was like it'll probably be just a conversation. It's like, oh bugger, I lost that game because of that. Oh well. But otherwise, it should be a bit of fun. The next one's around our trading. So this is we updating the trade block. We had a fair few conversations late last year, and obviously when I came back around the trade blocks, and there's a number of iterations of way it's implemented into the NBA, and it's really hard for us to be able to try and realistically put them in. So Ben's a superstar in regards to his knowledge and what he knows about those restrictions, and we lean on him a bit definitely for some of the manual stuff. But we've tried to introduce something to make it a little bit more realistic. So last year we brought in week 5 and week 9 to be around the free agency and the pickups. So obviously the rookies are back. You can trade them from week 5, I think, and all our free agents you can pick from week 9. So that's actually to bring in alignment with those rules. This one here is around the trades, and obviously in the back end the trade blocks has been a little bit has been broken for a while, and obviously I haven't had time really to fix it because it's a fair amount of code. But ideally now, if I've got a new rule, I might be able to actually go spend a bit of time and hopefully get it right. And the idea around it is, in the rules, this one is going to be, there is actually a 60-day block in the NBA, but the way that they interpret it is if, during that period of time in a multiplayer trade, their salaries rated $0. Instead of actually being blocked, it becomes $0. and it's kind of really, really hard to try and replicate. And it would have added way more questions for the admin team. And ideally, it would make some pretty odd teams as well. So instead of putting in the replicating that rule, is we decided we'd put a block for multi-team instead of having the $0 value. We said we'd just block those for 60 days, but we'd allow players to be able to trade individually. So you can do, he's not trade blocked anymore. This will stop some of those enormous trades. Obviously some people are very proud on their 10 and 12 team trades, which are ridiculously exhausting, I'm sure, with the amount of talks and, manipulating pieces and stuff. But it kind of brings, as I said, it brings it back into alignment where the NBA is. And we also give a little bit more flexibility for those single trades. So I don't think it's a bad thing, and obviously there wasn't a huge amount of conversation about it in the chat. So I would say yes and no. There may have been some stuff in the back end. I will point out that anyone who talks in the back end and doesn't talk in the general chat or directly to the admin team, that opinion doesn't actually get seen, and that's not going to help us get better in the league. Those opinions and views do need to be talked about if you actually want to implement change and help the league improve and progress. We need your vision to help us. So a lot of these visions, obviously, I won't deny a lot of the ideas do come from me, but I can't say all of the ideas are good. So there's some bad ideas as well. So, I'm always happy to hear them. But that one's one kind of went through. That was actually a Ben suggestion, so that was awesome. And within the team, we come around that kind of suggestion. The trading, actually, I'll say the other ones that got passed through before I go into the last one. The awards was realistically a fairly tiresome task for trying to get all the nominations. So ideally, I just said I'll automate it. And I'll say let us ask for it. And I said, sure, I'll give some stipulations around it. We'll announce it. I'll try and get an automated 2 nominations from each team for each category. Reason for that is I'm hoping that within those 2 is actually going to be the one you pick. So the second one's an outlier. So that's the hope. If I miss on the 2, maybe the algorithm needs an update, so we can always look at that next year. But hopefully I get it about right, and it saves that massive overhead, and maybe I can set it up so you can kind of one click and automatically starts the voting, and who knows. But ideally the bonus of that is I can do that later in the year. I don't have to do it now. I can do it week 15, week 16, or maybe even near playoffs, depending on how we spread the workload. But I guess that was an easy one. I didn't see any comments really on that other than understanding, and all seemed pretty positive. The rosters, this obviously, it's an interesting, because obviously we heard a few people talk about it, and made it sound like it was very against. But then we put the vote up, and I think it was unanimous. Maybe there was only one person who's obviously made himself aware that he voted against, but everyone else was pretty keen to see some kind of, a little bit less flexibility. The one thing I've always kind of pushed flexibility. I've always enjoyed having odd and weird lineups and all kinds of stuff, but and when they had the point guard rule in the NSL, I was really against it. I didn't enjoy it at all, so I was fairly happy that they brought that out. But at the time, I had LeBron James, and I think I used him at point guard maybe 3 games the whole year. So I used it very differently to the way people use it now. And when you saw some of those lineups, like it's been multiple years that we've seen these lineups, so it's definitely not a rule based on last year. Because when someone said Sheed, that's not true. We've seen all kinds of lineups that have been odd and stupid, and sometimes they win, sometimes they don't. It's flexibility. It's always good to have a try, but ideally, what we were seeing is some teams were six centers down, like they'd have 6 centers. There was about 3 or 4 teams that had a large amount of centers, which took out all of the value, like increased their value ridiculously in the league. But it meant there was a number of teams that didn't have centers, and it made it really hard for disparity across the league. We kind of saw that as a problem, We also saw that guards weren't getting much love. You know, they were almost like the child that you didn't want. And you've kind of got to make a little bit more league realism, and hence this is why we come up with this suggestion. We weren't 100% sure how we were going to implement it. We actually had talked about this for weeks about how we could do it, and obviously we just announced how. It's made a couple of players maybe lose their flexibility, but it's actually 100% realistic. So it's based on where they've played in the NBA, and obviously there's an up down, so there's still that huge amount of flexibility. Leroy put that post together, and we were all very happy with the way that he kind of wanted to share. And it was actually, I think, was it his idea or Ben's? I don't know. I know we all kind of had up some ideas, so I won't say it was mine. But ideally, they come up with this over 20%, which shows real, where they're actually good, where they're playing, and you've still got that flexibility up and down. So I'm really proud of that rule, and I think that that's going to really go well. It took me, half to more than half of a day to try and get it right because I had to implement the change in 3 total independent pieces of code. Hopefully I got it right, and in the back end we've got a little bit of flexibility. It is a manual task though at this stage, so I don't think I'll ever be able to automate it unless we change the source of where the data's from. So it'll be a manual thing each year, and hopefully it's brings us still joy. I know some people might not like that little bit of but I feel this kind of seems a little bit more realistic. Um, okay, so there are all the rules that did get implemented. If we go over the one that didn't, and I probably should say that we did at the start, we kind of had these kind of how we're going to, but I went a little bit kind of gung ho and just started the votes to try and get us actually migrating or start us moving because, we always run out of time. So, I pushed out that vote for the in-game injuries actually before the admin realised, and then we had to kind of get us set a bit of clarity in the background of what we're voting for. So that's on me. I was just trying to move us a little bit quicker than I probably should have been. And then ideally, we had the chats over that whole week, so we actually chatted every day just about everyone's views and how it's been taken. And that's why at the end we kind of thought that in-game one was the only one that needed to vote on, and everyone else, there wasn't a huge amount of against, except we had some fairly vocal jams, and it felt like their pointed view was not really towards the league, but their team and their certain scenario and their situation about trying to compete for a championship this year. And I understand that they've put in a lot of time and effort to get the team that they want, but we're obviously trying to get the best for the league and get that. We don't want the same teams always competing. We don't want that view that we had in other leagues. We've seen the history. We know what could happen. We try to fix that, or we're trying to at least move it in a way that we see a lot of differences and just that levelness within the league and the ability for you to take a team and be able to do something with it within a few years instead of having to inherit a team that means that you won't have any history or you won't have any future for 5 years is definitely not the way we want to progress this league. So based on that though, we also have that realism side to it. And if you have a look at that last rule that we eventually did put them back out there, because obviously after we pushed forward, we had another chat. We had some people reach out directly. We're going, okay, maybe we'll put in a couple extra things to the vote, just mainly to show that we do listen and we do care. And so we did. And obviously one voted and still came through, but the other one was the players rate over 87. So this one was an interesting one because we actually had so many back and forwards. So don't think this was something that we hadn't kind of we spent a lot of time on. And obviously we had to also work out a way to sell it because it was always going to be a pretty drastic change. It's not a rule anywhere, and ideally we were trying the goal is obviously trying to work out how to make our leagues more real, and there's one massive difference in our league compared to what's out in the real league, and that is the emotions. So we don't have to deal with the emotions of players. We don't have to deal with the the fallout of the supporters, the people that all of the news articles and all that kind of stuff. So say for example, if one example was if Steph Curry got injured, and that means I can't go for the championship. But if Steph Curry gets injured for the Golden State Warriors, there's zero chance they're trading him. No chance. And to be honest, I don't think the GM I don't think he would get traded in the NSL either. But there's, the fallout would be enormous. And it's like, well, who are you going to replace him with? And what team's going to actually make that trade for you to get a star to then be able to compete for that championship? And that player then sits on their bench while they get a draft pick just sitting there waiting to hopefully get that higher draft pick from tanking. It just does not happen. It's no realism. And ideally, as I said, the fallout would be enormous if it happened in real life. But here, it just happens every year. It's not just the one scenario this year. Like it happened last season, but it's happened multiple seasons, and we've seen it. Teams can turn around a season very quickly based on, and that's how Curry got picked up originally because he was injured. And there's how a number of other players. Well, actually, Curry wasn't, but there was others. So I'd have to look back. There's definitely some players that obviously. There's definitely some players that have been out for long periods. That's how I got faults, I guess. So I can't really say I didn't use the rule as well. Um, but there's kind of you do still want to have some kind of guidance. And what's sort of happened is some of the top teams end up just pointy, and we end up with a fairly big disparity in the league, and that's what we're seeing, and that's why we're trying to work out ways that we can put some kind of upper and lower guidance to push teams closer together. We do want that competitive nature in the league, and if that competitive nature leaves, I'm leaving. I'll put it fairly direct. I don't want a league where the same teams win over and over, the same bad trades and the same people or the same GMs or the same teams or the same kind of movements are happening, and all we're doing is topping up the same teams to win championships, not leaving any kind of competitive nature for other teams. I don't see a reason for me to stick around, and I think that others will leave too. And there's, people say it's the best league, but hey, they have their own view on that, and they understand why they think it's the best league. Every person has their own view of why this league's really good for them. And as I said, that's my reason. I don't think that, as I said, I can't see myself staying if there's no chance of me ever winning because I have that competitive nature. I want to win eventually. You know, there's other teams that I see are working so hard. I want to see them win. I want to see competitive playoffs. I don't want to see 16 wins in a row. I want to see, or realistically, when I did it in the other league, I had a team that could have easily been beaten by right settings. Actually, I knew that. I just decided that I did a heap of testing. I knew exactly where the different manipulations are. They're not the right matchups, and I won through that. But in our league, there's not that kind of. I haven't seen. I haven't seen that. I've seen a couple of settings. They find the right, and then they leave the team, and it wins 16 in a row. Or, you know, I find the team makeup was amazing. So I won't say there's those teams at the top are really good, but they're built around 2 or 3 stars, and then just finding the holes. And it seems there's no change in philosophy. It's been 3 years, and the same makeup and the same team structure has just been the same. Like like I like to see something different. I haven't seen where a rookie's come through and dominated our league, who isn't dominating the NBA. Like I loved seeing that. Some glitch players. We're barely seeing them. It's not the same. I like to see some kind of changes, and ideally, I guess that unpredictability nature is the part that I enjoy the most, and we're not really seeing that. And that was where maybe that rule, the 87, was trying to make some changes to say, I'm really sorry you lost that player for the year. It is going to hurt. But ideally, if you had some depth, that'll make a fairly big difference, and you can kind of continue, which means your players at 8, 9, and 10 actually start meaning a lot more instead of you only having 3 players that are good. You've got the other way around that you can start seeing that the superstars and the stars actually spread around the league a lot more because obviously there's that concern that if an injury goes down, you kind you want to set yourself up to continue. So the total different mindset comes into it. But as I said, I can understand why people don't want that taken away because obviously it takes away a strategy. But the realism, I don't know. This is just me talking out loud, and I feel that something's got to change. Otherwise, we're going to have, you know, this year we've got the top 2 teams again. I actually think there's a fairly big gap between the top 2 and the third team. I know a lot of people have a clouded view or a view that there's going to be a lot closer, but I don't. I think there's 2 teams, and the rest of us are just filling in the spaces. So I hope to be proven wrong. Anyway, I appreciate if you listened, and hopefully you didn't get bored. And I'll chat to you again another time. Bye.